Hey guys, it's Dave and Dor with Tactical Hyve, and today we're going to be going over our career in lasers, just kind of the evolutions and how things got better. I mean, we both used the heck out of these things pretty much our entire careers overseas. Huge advantage, a lot of cool mental pictures flowing through my head right now. And, we'll get into it.
Yeah.
Up next.
Hey guys, this video today is brought to you by Dry Fire Mag. If you live in a striker fire world, they are probably the piece of equipment you need most. It allows you to reset your trigger without having to manipulate the slide for uninterrupted dry fire training. So if that's the world you live in like me, check them out down in the description below.
Hey, we'd also like to thank CCW Safe and Better Holsters for sponsoring the channel. So Dave, baby, IR illuminated, laser illuminators. SOP mod kind of had a slow incubation period. It could arguably go back to World War II, but you started to see things towards the end of the Vietnam conflict, and then slowly we had that lull in the 70s, but in the 80s it picked up. And by the 90s, mid-90s, we really kind of had that first gen SOP mod, being fully developed.
Yeah.
And by the end of the 90s, everybody in a special operations command had it.
Was rocking and rolling it. I actually started before we had these.
Yeah.
So I started, the predecessor to this was the Pac 4 Charlie, what I had. And it was nothing but a laser. So, it looked like this, maybe a little bit smaller in length, but all it was a laser. And it was a huge jump going from a laser to illuminator because we couldn't see shit half the time.
Yeah. Were you guys running IR filters on your white lights?
100%, yeah.
Okay, so that helped.
It did help. Like you said, it was good for 100 yards maybe, depending on what bulb you had and what kind of battery life you had. You get 100 yards at night, but that was a big advancement too. Like 100 yards at night when it's pitch black was something that we weren't able to do before we had it, and then SOP mod Block 1 came out.
Yeah, and then with it, the PEC 2. I've only heard of these things referred to as PEC 2, the TV remote controller. But every upper had one of these. Just about every primary weapon system had one of these when I first got to the team. But, there's no red lens, there's no visible laser, so you do have to be on nods. So you'd see guys down on the high bay, shutting all the doors and windows, or on deployment, you just climb up somewhere high and freaking, wait for the sun to get dark. And that's a huge disadvantage. So, obviously with the size, and it ran on, they were two completely different, systems, two different battery ports. I mean, if memory serves, you could take the battery out of one side and the other side would still work.
Yep, correct.
Am I remembering correctly? So but they were, brought together. They didn't have the safety screws in them yet. And so, having that high power laser in a training environment where your opposition or, your friends, your brothers, your relatives, your brethren, your countrymen, not the deal.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of room for improvement. And by the time I deployed in 2005, this bad boy had hit the supply shelf. Yeah, this is the PEC 15 Atpeel. Am I saying that correctly?
Yep.
Atpeel?
Atpeel.
Yeah.
Game changer.
Game changer. When's the first time you saw one of these?
Yeah, same time frame. Those came in, I think, early 2000s.
Yeah, first time I saw them was definitely in 2005. We had them for my first deployment. They were all black. And I didn't know one way or the other on the PEC 2s because, again, I received no formal training on this stuff. But they definitely had the heavy models of these for 7.62.
Yeah.
And that's something you really need to be aware of, is not all lasers are made the same, and they're not all rated for the same harmonic whip of larger, more powerful calibers. So pretty much all of them across the board can handle 5.56 or 9 mil, but if you're going to start stepping it up in the chutzpah, the oomph, you definitely want to make sure you have something rated correctly. And that's, so the ones that we had an H for heavy on the serial number. And I thought that was pretty cool because we were definitely going to be running these on 7.62 weapon systems.
Where I thought the big jump was again, that Pac 4 was just a laser. And it was such a huge jump to go to something now with an illuminator. And now a huge jump with a visible laser that was on the same plane as the infrared laser. So zeroing now was cakewalk.
It was, but they zero separate of one another. But you could go ahead and line those up.
Well, no, I mean like the infrared.
Oh yeah, the red and the IR, of course,
are together. So now I could do it in the daytime or low light. I didn't have to wait for midnight. Yeah, I didn't have to come into work 4 hours early to zero my laser.
Make sure I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it does run off of 3-volt 123 battery. But you're able to sight in and manipulate and adjust the laser and the flood separately.
Yep.
Which you could have done which obviously you could do
these are the same
PEC
way
too.
Yeah.
But just the ability to cater this to your needs was really cool.
What I also liked about it too, I remember we get that little SOP mod bag, we pull them all out.
Mm-hmm.
So then mine's busted now, but they bust all the time. But there was a suite of filter caps for your illuminator, right? And so it projects a pattern downrange when you use it. And first we were kind of like, well, how are we gonna implement these? They worked great. One was a triangle, one was a square, one was a circle, one was a cross. And the way we started utilizing those is like, it was easy for leadership to, identify themselves. Cause it's just a sea of lasers out there when you're on a big company mission or a platoon mission. There's just shit everywhere. Mm-hmm. And if I'm trying to direct you, right here, that laser, no, this laser. It was easy for a squad leader to have a cross, and this squad had a diamond, whatever it was. But signal recognition or laser recognition out there, just using your illuminator was so much easier.
Yeah. I remember seeing those in the armories, like they'd be piles of them in drawers and stuff. But I don't think we ever used them.
The next big advancement they have with these that these didn't have are these blue shipping plugs right here, right? And that's your safety. So when we're stateside, anytime you're using force-on-force stuff, with other people, these shipping plugs had to be in here, which prevented this from going to high power. They say that's eye safe. Okay, sure. That's definitely not eye safe. So that's why they made us put those blue shipping plugs in there. And if you didn't have both of them, it was quite the ordeal. You weren't allowed to train.
Yeah, when they got we got farther into using this equipment. Obviously, the military caught up, and having laser safety officers, laser safety rated ranges and protocols became a thing. And so obviously these blue screws, they would check for them. You had to have them. And that wasn't a thing at first. But I noticed that kind of more towards the end of the 2000s.
Yeah. The other big thing I said that these were different was these diffusers, like this is a diffuser or a pattern generator. Mm-hmm. This right here diffuses that's the laser and the visible laser all in one panel, right? But when you're trying to zero your rifles and really get finite, you really have to play with the ambient conditions. They're going to change. Even on operationally, it's going to change. In beginning of the night, it's still bright out. The ambient conditions are still pretty bright. You need that thing off and pretty much on high power to see clearly. But now it's 3:00 in the morning. It's pitch ass black. And even on low settings, sometimes your laser will wash stuff out. So you learn that maybe I put this up and I run it on high power and it dims it to where I want to. So you had to play with this,
Mm-hmm.
Low power with it off, low power with it on. But it made it much easier for being more precise when you're zeroing. But you just had to learn how to use it back and forth.
Nice. Again, this is probably the biggest leap forward in our careers that we saw. Well, obviously the older one didn't even have the illuminator, but this one doesn't have like a lanyard loop, secondary attachment piece. You could run it through the battery cap loop, but that's not strong. That could get ripped off very easily. But losing these is a big deal for a number of reasons. And so they actually added on a hard mounted part of the plastic housing loop. So you could achieve that TPI, 2 points of integrity. And just in case your primary mounting system or only mounting system failed, it backed off, the screws backed off, it cracked, whatever, you'd have this thing annoyingly dangling off your rifle, which we've seen it, which happens. We've seen it.
With these here, the way we used to tie these off, kind of like going back to like when we first got the aim points. Remember the aim points? Again, we're learning how to tie circular crap off that have no anchor points. Uh-huh. We found that we would take 550 cord and gut it. And then the gutted worked best. We would tie a really tight Prusik knot, and we could crank a Prusik knot down right here. And then once that Prusik knot's really tight, we would tie an overhand knot so the Prusik can't back off, and then just tape the shit out of it.
Nice.
And it worked, but it was not, it was necessity, which is why they came out with these.
Yeah, I don't remember what, if anything, we did. I didn't use these for very long. They were kind of in their twilight when I got there. I just don't remember. But yeah, I mean, you got to do what you got to do, and cinching it down with 550. You know, it's not perfect, but it's definitely better than nothing.
Right, 100%. It's better than, hey Sergeant, I lost my laser.
Yeah, definitely better than nothing. And then, so this thing, you know, was pretty much did most of the heavy lifting in the GWatt era. But towards the end of the 2010s, definitely by 2020, I think these were starting to become more and more common.
Yep.
And so again, another advancement. And one thing you'll notice, you know, this is the NGAL, Next Generation Aiming Laser. I know that one. I know because it's funny, because that name's going to get real stale real fast, as there's always another one coming. But anyway, these two account for the front sight post on an M4, M16. But, you know, everybody's running free floats for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to start to see these things narrow down, and you're not going to be able to have that front sight post, be it a folder or a fixed, in front of this thing. And, you know, there's pluses and minuses to that. But, you know, all in all, you know, it's smaller. It's less likely to bang on things or get damaged. So a step in the right direction. You know?
I think that's why you start to see a lot of the flip up front sight posts too start to go more narrow and narrow and narrow.
Yeah.
You know, look at some of the original ones, how wide they were.
Yeah.
Look at the new ones now, they're super narrow.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I would just assumed I would just kind of run it behind or go without, honestly. But I have very little personal experience with these. I pretty much just use these. Even when they were starting to issue these out in larger numbers, I just had an appeal because I wasn't frontline trace. But yeah, smaller, lighter. They're very reliable, very durable. I haven't heard any major complaints or issues or recalls or anything with them.
One thing they did too is the heat shielding in there. You know, these are great, but you slapped it on the end of your gun, and obviously you run your gun hard, it gets hot. And there used to be issues, nothing significant. I mean, it wasn't like, you know, things were shifting bad, but you know, the heat does start to erode the electronics over time. And then you don't have that as much with that. My biggest, I like the NGAL. I'm a huge fan of it. Ran it forever and ever. What my biggest complaint was, so when I zero my laser, and then I use my illuminator, right? My illuminator, I can move my illuminator and kind of move it over and zero it over top of my laser, so it's all centered up. But as I adjust the flood size of my laser, as I adjust the flood size of my illuminator, make it bigger or smaller, but if I start to make it smaller where it's more condensed and brighter, it'll actually shift off because they're not on the same plane. But with the ad peel, I could just quickly, with my fingers and gloves, I could adjust that so that it fit the needs or the conditions that I was in.
Mm-hmm.
And with this one here, you got to have that little bitty screwdriver tool, and you can't. So you're kind of screwed. That's the only thing that I ever had an issue with it.
Okay.
Great piece of gear.
Yeah. Did you ever mark off your setting with like a paint pen or a Sharpie?
Yep.
Yeah.
So you see
that helps, you know, in case there's any, you know, this thing somehow gets twisted a little bit. You're not going to notice, especially if it's a little bit off. But at distance, you know, when in those no-fail clutch situations, a little is a lot. Inches and miles. But, you know, just putting a little mark there to kind of, you know, keep track of where things are is something I saw quite a bit in regards to keeping lasers on target.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, making it more less susceptible to heat damage is definitely a big plus. I don't recall or really noticing that with app peels.
It wasn't that they would go off. They wouldn't screw the zero up, remember? But it would just it would erode it. Remember?
It would just them fail. But I don't remember seeing these break very often, not at all. But I've seen a ton of EOTechs fail.
Dude.
And if you don't believe me, I dare you to run your EOTech directly over your chamber. Please don't. It'll be expensive. But I've seen those, and these are the older ones, you know, they're under new management, they're a new company, and they make a great product. But running that EOTech over the top of the chamber too far forward off the actual receiver, now you're starting to get onto the free flow rail, it just cooks those things. And I've literally seen the glass like melt and come down. You've probably seen it too.
I have. And they fixed it. They did. They got...
I still wouldn't run my EOTech over the chamber because there's no mechanical standoff. But for the same reason, I would never run my laser over the chamber because the chamber is the hottest part of the gun. And that's pretty far back. When you start getting into Rattler territory, you know, that can be an issue. So something to look out for. But obviously, we're kind of living in a riser world, the rise of risers.
Mm-hmm.
And Some people are even putting their lasers up on risers. You know, GBRS has their Hydra mount, and that will definitely keep your equipment safe from overheating if that's something you're worried about on a small Rattler-esque platform. So just something to think about. And then Dave, baby, take us away on this, on the hotness.
So the mall, the cool thing about the mall, and I never ran one of these operationally. I've ran these for a couple of years now, but you know, I've done a lot of training on them, but these weren't out when I retired. They're the newest hotness, right? And what makes them the hotness is, it has all the same capabilities that this has, right? But this is completely modular. So these break down, like that's a body part, that's a body part, that's a body part. You know, if I want to run this and flip it to the other side of the gun, I just work it around, pull it apart, flip it over. The settings on this are like incredible. So you get it set how you want it, and then you easily, once you have it set, you have two go-to buttons. If I want it, you know, a very small condensed illuminator with a bright light in the middle, I've got it set right there. You know, if I want a big wide illuminator for like it's in the house, or I really want to illuminate something, and then my dot in the middle, I have it right here. And then you have 3 different power settings: power 1, power 2, non-safe, right? It's so much easier instead of trying to move shit on the fly, and it's all right there with your hand. I'm a big fan. It's got 2 shipping plugs in the back, so if you're that guy that wants to run pressure switches, you know, you can run a pressure switch for each one, or you can run them into a dual. Still has some blue safety plugs like everything else, and then change it. It's just that's off. You know, the first switch is visible, vis right there, and then the next one is IR, infrared, and you're ready to rock and roll. It's a great product, very modular. Yeah, solid metal. It's off the gun, off to the side, more like your flashlight runs. You know,
cool. Yeah, I don't think I ever saw these when I was in the military. Maybe I did, but I definitely didn't use one, and I just learned a lot about them just now. So I hope you did too. But yeah, these things, I know they have a great reputation. I know they're very popular, but based on their power output, like the flood, the laser power on this versus this, is there a distinct difference?
I'm telling you, that DA, man, honestly, like when it gets into like the geeking out over, you know, 3 watt, 5 watt lasers, I don't really know, but just my visual eye, that DA seems so much brighter, so much brighter. I do know this. Now this is for sure happens. The flood. So that flood, the infrared flood on this is significantly brighter than that. I've been to a couple courses that were the shoot house in the course. I don't know what it is, what kind of paint they use on the wall, but it just sucks up all the infrared light. And I always, you know, I thought the Ingalls, the heat, like that's the heat, because that's my last experience with it, you know? So I rolled there and I'm rolling into the shoot house, and man, hitting my illuminator on high, opened up too, and it just wasn't getting the job done. And some of the guys behind me were running those, and man, the moment they touched the ceiling, they lit up the ceiling with that thing on the illuminator on high. It was like the hand of Jesus came out and flipped the lights on. You could see everything. So yeah, significant difference.
We get a little water into wine while we're at it, you know?
Yeah, I do know this. So B.E. Myers makes that DA Mall, and because it's modular, is half the reason why it has the size to it. They're working on making a new version that reduces its size and brings it back down to something like this. But I don't know the specifics on it. I just know they're working on reducing the size.
And then have you run this on 7.62 or anything higher?
I've ran it on a 6.5 Creedmoor.
Okay. Yeah, just do they come like one model is good for up to 308, or do they have like a...
I don't really know.
Okay.
To be honest.
All right. I don't have to worry about it. Alrighty. Well, cool. Thanks for the info. Learning. Always learning.
One really cool feature this thing has too, right? They're getting with the times, right? Is this little QR code on the side. So how many times have you been out somewhere and you don't have the manual, but you always have your phone? We always have our phones, right?
That's cool.
You can click that, and there's all your information you need to know about the mall DA, you know?
Oh yeah, now that we're looking at it, this one's got a QR code too. We never really thought about that. You're not supposed to have your phone on you when you're doing this, Sergeant.
Yeah, no,
But
exactly. And we probably painted them. That's why we didn't know.
yeah,
I mean, to be honest,
or they just got torn, they got scratched or dirty.
because we would always cover the serial numbers with paint or with tape, and then.
But honestly, at no point did I ever feel like I needed to look something up, because these ones are pretty simple.
Right. Yeah.
This one is basically the same thing as this one. It's just a smaller, better version. But
when you get into how to configure this thing, whether it's the buttons you want, the light switch you want, or even just taking the bodies apart and flopping it, you need a manual.
Yeah.
I need a manual.
Like if I was going to use this, I would definitely need the manual, because this is the most I've ever messed with one.
Yeah.
But going from this to this to this, I mean, it was pretty similar. They're just getting a little bit better here and there. But this thing is kind of a different animal, like, having the 2 different firing switches, the 2 different cable ports. This is definitely a step up.
Yep.
But, all in all, it's personal preference, what you're willing to spend, and how bad it's going to hurt when you lose or break it. Because the more you use this stuff, the more you train how you fight, the higher the likelihood of something bad happening to it. So, also keep that in mind. Cool, pal. Good talk. Thanks for the knowledge transfer.
It was good. It was fun.
Right on.
Enjoyed it.
All right, guys. This is Dave and Dor. Tactical Hyve. Out.